Got it. Well, thank you guys for being here with me today. I am dressed as a Spartan cheerleader because it is Halloween-ish. Like we do Beggars Night here in Iowa. I guess so, specifically Des Moines. So today would be our normal trick or treat. So that is why I'm dressed like this. So I hope you, if you know who they are, can enjoy the Spartan life. Otherwise, I apparently have aged out. So this is good to know this costume is no longer relevant in certain areas. So with that, today we are talking about empowering teams, the positive psychology approaches to breaking through bias. So bias is something that we all have. It gets people really uncomfortable talking about it. And this is where I'm really glad that you guys are here today and we can kind of talk through some of the scenarios that exist with bias, understanding that it is not necessarily a bad thing. We just sometimes have to be aware of what lens we approach things with. So with that, if you do not know who I am Dr. Claire Musselman. I am a behavioral scientist at Drake University. I teach in the College of Business, and I run the Master of Science and Leadership program with Dr. Shepard at the School of Education. And I like to do things a little bit more vibrantly and fun. So glitter and sparkles is kind of my brand, and I hope to bring you a little bit of positivity today as we navigate this dynamic. So moving on today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to identify biases. So this is where it's not a bad thing. Like we are biologically wired for this stuff, and there's a couple of things that happen when we get triggered as a result of our biases. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, when I approach the world, I approach it from a 40-year-old white woman who lives in Iowa standpoint. It doesn't mean that other people's approaches are wrong. It's how I see the world when I am making decisions, when I am evaluating things. And we all have this. We look at how we were raised, what generational dynamics have come into play, what coding we've gotten from teachers, friends, family, media, social media, what television, movies tell us. A lot of things end up impacting how we see the world. And this is where we just start to take a recognition for that and understanding, okay, what exists? Why does it exist this way? And then where can my viewpoints be challenged? This is where we can have a beautiful conversation about that you don't have to do things one way, just don't do them wrong is kind of a fun way to approach it when we're looking at how things are done in a work environment. Of course, we're going to apply some positive psychology. This does not mean that you slap a rainbow on it and add some glitter and sparkles, but that we are consciously rewiring our brain to come at things from a more optimistic and growth mindset. And so when we're looking at biases and talking about something that people can be very triggered by or feel that there's a negative connotation with, trying to start to reframe this to say that when we're looking at things from a 20,000-foot view, the goal behind this is to create a more inclusive space of knowing that just because I don't understand it in that case capacity doesn't make it wrong, but help me understand. And we'll talk through some of that. Then we're also going to talk about the importance of setting boundaries because this also exists. And sometimes people cross our boundaries and they do it unintentionally. And we need to be aware of how this plays into this. We're going to have some interactive learning concepts today. If you do choose to participate, fantastic. And also, just Sam's point, this is being recorded. And if you would prefer to put something in the chat or not have your name mentioned, I do understand because this is something that can be very sensitive. So I want to address that right away. And then lastly, let's talk about how we build action plans, not only for ourselves, but how do we bring this back to our teams so that we can create a more inclusive workspace. So let's kick this off. Does anyone want to tell me what they think bias is? What's bias? And again, if you want to just throw something in the chat, I do not have to say your name. Just curious if anyone wants to take a stab at this. Oops, wrong button. Favorable to one thing. Oh, I like that. That's a good definition. Okay, so the formal definition that we have is that bias is a tendency, inclination, or prejudice towards or against something, someone, often rooted in stereotypes. So to our friend that added in the chat, thank you. Favorability towards one thing over another. Absolutely. What a great way to put that. The things that we have to remember is that, yes, they can be conscious, but most of the time, we've got to assume good intent with people, and they tend to be unconscious. And this is where if we approach things from a seek to understand concept, this helps people diffuse the situation so they don't feel as guarded and as charged, but that they can be more receptive to, hey, I just wanted to give you an alternative perspective here. So this is where we look at what is explicit bias, when people are just kind of crappy, or unconscious, where I don't know that this is happening, but if you give me some awareness to it, I can be more conscious now. It impacts our thoughts, actions, and decisions. And this is why it's important to understand what frame you are coming to things with. If you were raised in a two-parent household versus a one-parent household, if you were raised by grandparents, if you were had heavy, if you had a heavy influence of your grandparents, if you didn't have that, family dynamics can absolutely root into a lot of bias. And I'm going to use an example. So I went to the University of Iowa and I'm an Iowa Hawkeye. In the state of Iowa, we have two main schools that people either tend to steer towards, one or the other. You have Iowa Hawkeyes or you have the Iowa State Cyclone. I was raised in a household where we only support the Hawkeyes. We hate the Iowa State Cyclones. And having that perpetuated over and over and over and over for your childhood, it makes it really hard for me to want to cheer for the Iowa Cyclone. Again, this is something that ends up being rooted into a deep-seated belief, and now we bring some awareness to it. And it sounds super superficial, I think, for the lack of better terms. We just don't have professional sports here in Iowa. But if you think about it, it's kind of one of those ways that you get groomed either by family, friends, teachers, anybody that has influence over you to have a favorability towards something or another. So I tend to support Iowa Hawkeyes and everything, and I'm very aware that this exists now. And also give a shout out to Iowa State Cyclones because I think they're undefeated for this football season. But sports are a good way to show this analogy, especially if you want to use something where it is not necessarily something that could be a personal characteristic to someone. Now, I apologize to another cheer that might support the Iowa State Cyclones. This is just an example that I feel like is a good one to illustrate. So, talk about some of our biases being biological. If you are a human being, you are biased. That makes people feel really uncomfortable. When I ask this to a group of people, sometimes people are very hesitant to raise their hand and say, yep, I'm biased. Okay, here's the thing. Biases exist because it's our biologic nature to stay alive. And so when we're encountering different people and different situations and different circumstances, our body is signaling, it is giving and receiving energy and trying to assess our surroundings. So if you are approaching somebody that you've never met before, our body is gauging, okay, is this person a friend or a foe? How confident do I assess this person to be? Are you going to have my back? Do you like me enough to back you up? And you're going through these things very quickly, and we pass a perception on somebody within a third of a second to judge our safety. Think about the last time that you went to a new city, for example. We assess, okay, where am I standing? Where are the people that are with me? Where do I put my bags? Where do I have my purse? Which side of the street am I on? Your left side, the right side. Okay, who are these people? Are there people on the ground? Where are we at? And you're just kind of assessing different situations because, again, our body is trying to figure out, am I safe? Am I in an okay space? And when it's unfamiliar, you don't have the neural pathways designed yet to understand, yep, this is normal. No, this is not normal. So our body is trying to take in all of this information and figure out what's going on. When the body feels that something is unsafe, the amygdala triggers. And the amygdala is one of the oldest parts of the brain before it has evolved throughout time. And so it ends up sending a response throughout your body that increases cortisol and can increase adrenaline. So sometimes when you pass someone and it makes you feel uncomfortable, maybe it's somebody you've never seen before, or there's just something off and you have that gut instinct, your amygdala gets triggered. So this is why it doesn't make it that that person is bad or anything along those lines, but we want to trust our gut and we want to be aware, why is this happening? Is there a circumstance? Is this something that's unfamiliar? And we try to pay attention to what is going on in your surroundings to be aware, bringing this to your frontal lobe so you can make some objective, rational decisions based upon the information that you're receiving. So think about this back to tribal mentality. If your tribe is approaching another tribe, we're going to say, are we going to be friends or are we going to war? And this is why we've got that trigger of an emotional response as well as a hormonal response that is going to help, or sorry, not help, but it is going to play into this. So just know that this is a biological thing. It does happen to everyone. And this is where we just want to bring some awareness, especially when we're in the workplace, because these are different situations than us being, centuries upon centuries upon centuries ago. Now, let's think about this in the workplace. And we can find lots and lots and lots of different types of biases in the workplace. I'm only going to talk about 3 today. So we're going to talk about confirmation bias. This is where we seek out information that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs. So let's say we have a human that is on our team that violates a safety protocol. Let's say they don't do something that we usually have them do. And then we automatically judge, well, of course, Joe's a terrible employee. He never does that. I knew he was a bad employee. Even though this might be a one off, we might try to use that as confirming information of what we might have thought about him from our first perception. So this can exist quite a bit. And we want to just be aware that there can be the good and the bad that goes into it's not always very specific in black and white, but there's a lot of gray area that works that we have within people. Then we look at affinity bias. And affinity bias is, hey, this is like our, oh, you look like me. Okay. This is why the power of human connection is so important. I use an example called tell me the similarities that you can find between a cat and a refrigerator. So if you think about what are those similarities? Okay, they both can grow fur, different sizes, different shapes. They both store food. They can both bring joy. There's a lot of things that can go into that. We can find connection points or similarities with other people, which is really important to do in our team. Because again, we know that affinity bias is real and we favor those who are similar to ourselves. The likability factor comes into play. What makes us like people? Well, having similar mutual connection points. So if you can find similarities between a cat and a refrigerator, we can find similarities between ourselves and another human being. Sometimes it's a lot harder. Maybe it can be a mutual connection point. It can be a sports team. Maybe it can be a cause that you both share. Maybe it's a pastime or a hobby or a role you both play in a certain situations as part of your life. Being aware of this is really important because we tend to gravitate to these people as it is. And so as a leader and being as really paying attention into the workplace, we want to be aware and conscious that this exists so that we can help build those bonds that need to exist within our team for better cohesion and overall understanding. Lastly, we have halo effect, and this is where we let one positive trait influence our entire perception of someone, kind of like this person can do no wrong. The opposite of the halo effect is the horns effect, where if someone does something, a negative trait will influence nothing that they do will ever be good enough, smart enough, etc. And these perceptions exist pretty heavily. One of the best ways that I can illustrate this in the workplace is think about performance reviews. We use a lot of recency bias in this, and we'll fixate on what has been done recently for the performance review rather than extrapolate it out for the entire year. Sometimes we will have a halo effect or a horns effect that comes into this where we're like, okay, I'm going to rate the review based upon this because they did this one thing that was phenomenal instead of taking a snapshot of the full year. Recency bias can come into play for that. Same thing could be true for the horns effect as well. So they're just things that we want to be considering while we're developing our teams and trying to get more of an inclusive workspace. So I'm going to turn this over to you guys. Have you guys ever noticed a time where you might have shown a bias in your decision making or perception? And how does that impact the outcome? And if you guys are not comfortable sharing, please know that that is okay. I do have an example for you as well. I'll give it a moment and see if anyone wants to put it in the chat. All right. We have one. All right. There's one that went on hiring one. This is a good example. So I recently was talking to another leader within our industry that had expressed that they have a no nepotism policy, which I think we see quite a bit over in organizations, and people have them or don't have them, or there's specificities that exist around this. And we had someone who okay, so like, nope, no nepotism. If it's so-and-so's daughter, husband, friend, you name it, we just, sorry, family member specific to this. So it was presented, well, if you didn't know that they were related to someone, would they stand on their own merit and own value? Would you want to hire them? So this situation became very perceptual, where if we did not know the background about whose family member this person was, would we still hire them? And the consensus was this person is a fantastic hire. Now, the fact that they are somebody's family member, that would normally exclude them. But because if we would take that away, would you still hire them? And so they did end up making the decision to hire. So this is kind of those things where we've gotten these preconceived policies that come from this to try and make ourselves not biased in situations, but they can also really hurt you if you don't have parameters in place for things like this. Like this is going to be a great hire. They ended up hiring this individual. She's doing wonderfully. So two things can be true. We can hold more than one belief at a time, and we don't want to discord people or think illy of them just because of certain scenarios like that. So we've got to check our perceptions around that as well. So let's think about the impact of bias in workplace culture, because it does make a pretty big difference and a pretty big impact on the culture within not only our team, but also within the organization as a whole. So let's think about this. Some key points that I want to highlight about how this plays into workplace culture. This is where we see favoritism, we see discrimination, and we see a lack of diverse perspectives. So one of the things, like I am a professor here at Drake University, I usually turn off who the assignments come in from. We have the ability in our learning management system to shut off who the student is. So we don't see a name. And so when we're grading, it's just here's somebody's paper, here's somebody's paper, here's somebody's paper, and you don't know who they are, which I think can be really helpful because as much as we want to say that we're not biased, that we always have a preconceived notion, and even if it is in a subconscious. So to help not lead towards favoritism or discrimination or any type of recency bias, horns effect, halo effect, that is something that I try to do to keep myself in line with that. So when we start to look at what this looks like from a workplace culture, people feel awful when they know that favoritism exists. And we know this because I think all of us have been on that opposite side at some point of our lifetime, whether it was when we were younger, we remember teacher's pet or the favorite student. And then now, even in our workplaces, where it's like, well, of course, the boss is always going to call on him or her because they love that person. Or, of course, that idea is going to get green light because he presented it. So we think about things like that. The other thing that we need to pay attention to is when we're interacting with our teams and people, you're either leaving people better than you found them or you weren't. And how you're approaching conversations in a group dynamic is going to either build trust and transparency throughout the process or it's going to erode it. So if you have this favoritism, discrimination, or you're not allowing diverse perspectives in your team, over time, this is going to absolutely start to erode that team cohesion and collaboration element. So you're going to start to see job performance might suffer, employee engagement might suffer, and overall employee satisfaction might suffer. So this is where we have this attention that exists behind what is equitable, what is inclusive, and what makes an effective workplace. And it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about with people because nobody wants to admit to having them. But we all have them. We just have to make sure that we can be aware around this process. And the more that you can just address, like, okay, I get it. How do I try and make it so it is more equitable and inclusive in this standpoint? What can I do to put better benchmarks or parameters within this place? So, what are some ways that you think biases can impact team performance or morale? Making sure you guys are still awake with me today. Okay, here we go. So one of our participants says that they can be lowered. I agree with it. When you think about biases, it's absolutely going to lower team performance and team morale. So this is where, if you think about if we shut somebody down during a meeting, what does that say to everybody else within the meeting? It can be awful. And then if people might not put forth the effort because they don't feel like it matters. That's another great one. It hinders teamwork. Absolutely. These are great. Thank you guys. Oh, this is a good one too. All right, coming back to the nepotism. Our industry can be wrought with nepotism, and this can make it the approach of specific colleagues. Like it makes us a little skeptic because we don't know who's related to whom, what kind of perspective they're going to have. When we start to think about how we information share, what's going to go back to people, this is good. This is really good. Thank you guys. All right, so let's keep going. Let's talk about positive psychology. So I really want to highlight that this is not about just having, all of these touchy feely, yay, this is unicorns and rainbows. That is not the point of positive psychology. So let's talk about what the definition is so we're all on the same page. It is a scientific study about what makes life worth living. It focuses on strength, well-being, and factors that will help individuals and communities thrive. So this is where we start to use a mindset shift. And all of our minds are wired with these wonderful things called neural pathways. And you get to pick what those look like. Here's what: it's not your fault what happened to you. It's your fault if you choose to stay that way. So sometimes we tend to be wired more with the negativity bias, especially being in our industry where we see a lot of things that come. It makes us a little bit jaded, but it's up to you if you want to keep your mind that way or not. So there are ways you can actively start to rewire your brain and look at the world as an abundant growth mindset versus it being this negative world where everything is out to get you. And this is where we start to shift from what's wrong into what's right. So instead of focusing on fixing negatives, we actually leverage our strengths and positives. And this is just a different approach that has come about in the past 20 to 30 years, a lot more heavily about what we are looking for within the psychological realm and how our neuroplasticity is able to evolve. So if we want to start looking for things in a more positive lens, we want to start looking at ourselves differently, we can do it. It's kind of like Home Depot. You can do it, we can help. Positive psychology is the help part so that you can do this. It is about cultivating awareness, kind of like with our biases, about what exists and then what are we going to do to move that needle forward. So when we start to look at what are the core concepts that exist with this, number one is gratitude. So I'm going to give you guys some examples of things that I do every day. And I say this because I legitimately do them every day. This morning I woke up and the first thing I thought of was, I am so grateful to be alive. Now, I also am really grateful that I have the ability to have a voice. Last night, one of the last articles that I read was that the Taliban has now silenced women. They are not allowed to hear the sound of another woman's voice. So when I look at that from like my own lens and my own world of being able to have a voice, like right here with you guys, right here, right now, I think about how much power that is, and I am grateful for that. So I think about gratitude on a regular basis. I love looking at what can I be grateful for that might not have always been here, or what things do I take advantage of. Like having the ability to breathe easily and effortlessly was not something my father-in-law had the ability to do, and he needed a bilateral lung transplant. So there are days where maybe life isn't as easy to pull the positive from, but I'm reminded like I am alive, I am breathing, I am an able-bodied person, and that's a really good baseline to start with. So when you think about like what is our perspective and our perception, how are we wiring our neural pathways? What are we doing to actively engage our brain to be the protagonist of our story in a world of abundance versus being a victim of circumstance? And we can talk a little bit more about this here in a second. But then we're going to look at another concept of positive psychology is resilience. And I want you guys to clarify this in your mind. Resilience is not the ability to endure. And we kind of focused on that. And I think our corporate culture for the past 2 decades has been very heavy on just keep going, just keep going. You can do more with less. You can do more with less. You can do more with less. That is not what resilience is. How quickly can you restore yourself? And what does that look like? So I'll give you guys an example. So I run hard all the time. It's who I am. It's something I like. I like the ability that I have. Like I like to run hard. I like to do all of the things, and I'm not going to stop. I don't want to. But I have gotten really good at knowing what recharges me. So I love to be in nature. I love to hike, and I love coffee. So a blend of those things tends to be really great. But on days where I don't feel awesome or something has kind of eroded at my own personal battery, I need to find a way to get outside, whether it's sunlight, whether it's just getting outside to breathe fresh air, whatever that is, doing some type of kinesthetic movement in an outside area is what's going to help me refuel my battery. And if we start to look at what do you do to recharge your battery, what are you doing and how often can you do it for yourself? I know there is a participant on today who had told me, like, make sure you schedule a massage once a month. So you know you've always got something to look forward to. This isn't being grandiose about doing big things for yourself. There's small things that help you take care of yourself to recharge yourself so that you can keep going at whatever speed you need to go at whatever rapid pace. And I want you to also think about this because we're on the precipice right now of the holiday season. Here's where we're going to be asked to do a million things in a very small amount of time. We're going to need to set boundaries, and also what can you do to keep recharging yourself? One of the other things that I do is free read at night, a fiction book. I'm totally into the Frida McFadden books right now because they're very easy for me. They're small chapters, but it's something completely out of this world. And even if it's only a couple of pages, It is something that I'm doing to recharge myself. So when we look at what is that capacity that you need? How easy is it for you to recharge your batteries? You got to figure out what that is for you. What do you need from that? Is it food? Is it fuel? Is it rest? Is it nature? Is it exercise? Like whatever that is for you that's going to allow you to keep going, do more of that and figure out how much you need because this is all inside work. And us taking the time to figure out what that is exactly what these principles or core concepts that affiliate with positive psychology is all rooted in. We just need to take the time to do it because guess what? If you do not take the time to figure out what you need and how to focus on this, the world is going to absolutely take away your time from you. Time is the only currency you have. So where do you become the protagonist of the story versus the victim to circumstance? And this is where we also start to look at what are your strengths. So the former concepts that we used to explore before this new adaptation into positive psychology was, okay, here are your strengths, here's your weaknesses. What are you doing to work on your weaknesses? That's not the way the positive psychology approach works. They're saying, what are your strengths? Cool, use them more. And then we build our team. What are your weaknesses? Perfect. Go find a team where your weaknesses are their strengths and build your team around that. And that is where we started to see, okay, this is what you're good at. These are your strengths. Cool. Let's keep encouraging them. And then we build around ourselves with having people who excel in the areas that we aren't super great in. I joke about this where it comes partially from like, I'm not good at cars. Like, I don't know how to change my own oil. That's I don't care. You know what? Not a strength. I joked my very first TPA job. It was the first question, back in the day when we used to ask, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And I was like, cars are my weaknesses. I don't care. So I choose to pay for a AAA membership and have an amazing mechanic because that is nothing that I want to spend my time or my energy or my resources toward. Minus, like, if I need something, I know where to go. So what does that look like for you? And I use kind of a funny example with that. But if I know like that going and collecting data isn't my strong suit, but I can absolutely tie that data into a bow and make it consumable for other people. Okay, so how can I go get like an actuary on board or somebody from finance that can help me get the data that I need to be able to present it to the people with whom I need to get on board to make decisions. So we start to focus on where are your strengths and then how do you leverage those other amazing people that are within your workplace to help focus on them. So I'm giving you a couple of examples. How do you focus on your strengths and positive traits? How do they improve team dynamics from your experience? So I can give you one more. And while I'm giving you this one, if you want to throw one in the chat, I would love to hear your perspective. When I was creating the workers recovery unit at Continental Western Group, I needed to be able to show data because a lot of the stuff that we were doing was considered very touchy-feely, very emotional intelligence based, and it wasn't quantifiable. If we show that people are having better outcomes based on they feel heard, seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued, like maybe they're getting back to work sooner, but what's your benchmarking? Where are you pulling this from? What about medical treatment? What about attorney representation? Like we needed to be able to pull all this data together. And so I went and talked to one of our lead actuaries and I was like, hey, Josh, can you help me with this? Here's what I need to show. I need to show this over time. Can you help me put this data together so that I know what we need to collect moving forward so I can show from this point to this point, this is what I know to be true. From this point to this point, I know this to be true. And he absolutely helped me design a framework and a benchmark. We worked with IT. And then I was able to understand exactly what I needed to be able to provide to my C-suite, as well as what I needed to provide to my leaders so that they could manage their teams correctly with the data that we were able to provide to show them what impact they were making. And so when we start to look at who's got these traits, who's got the positivity that can help support what you need, there's all these resources around us. We just have to start to use our political capital and our communication to be able to bring a workplace dynamic together. So there is an experience for you there. All right, so moving on. Let's keep going. Next up, we have recognizing and transforming biases. Okay, so now we're starting to take this in. I love this beautiful butterfly. It's really helpful. They're beautiful in this. And as we transform, what does this look like? So this is where we start to understand our awareness. Awareness is always the first step. If we what we don't know can and will hurt us, and we can't fix what we don't know. If you don't tell me I can't fix it, then we want to have some bias identification. Ask if assumptions are based on stereotypes or factual evidence. What do you know to be true? What is provable? It's amazing the amount of narratives that we tell ourselves versus what is absolutely factually true or can be proven. I have a lot of friends that do this where they'll talk about scenarios, and I'm like, okay, but has that happened or are you just making this up in your mind? I see this a lot more in relationships, but if we think about this as the relationship with coworkers or interdepartmental issues, what do you know to be true? Like, are you really in trouble or are you just perceiving that you are? Like, what did you actually do that could warrant somebody to be unhappy with you in a certain capacity? And so when we start to look at things from this landscape, we've got to figure out what is the story that we're telling ourselves and why. That can be really helpful. And then we've got to redirect our thinking. We want to be more inclusive and see these biases as opportunities for growth. Okay, I haven't considered that before. When we pull out to a 20,000-foot view and realize all of these beautiful perspectives that exist, awesome. It is also very helpful to offer someone an alternative perspective. Instead of saying they're no or calling them out for being biased, you say, could I offer you an alternative perspective? Could I offer you an alternative lens to approach this with? And we start to say things and use language that is more inclusive rather than accusatory. This whole idea of being more inclusive starts from the leader approach, and absolutely words matter, as does your tone and the speech cadence. So if you're trying to create this, I want your feedback. I want to better understand how I'm being perceived. What am I missing? Help me understand this. Or having that language of alternative perspectives. Can I offer you a different lens? Can I show you this other approach that you might not have been thinking of? Can be a really great way to get you first. So let's keep going. Can you give me an example, or at least think of one, where bias was reevaluated that led to a more inclusive decision? And while you guys are typing this in the chat, I'm going to give you an example from a wonderful, amazing person named Valerie Alexander. She does this amazing activity where she will ask you to close your eyes and let's do a visualization. So as you are thinking right now, I'm going to ask you to join me on this. I would like you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine that you are boarding an airline, your favorite airline. So if you're me, it's Delta. If you're my best friend, it's going to be, or sorry, me United. If you're my best friend, she loves Delta. So you're boarding a flight, you're taking a seat. Flight attendants are asking you to go ahead and buckle your seat. Your bag is a little bit out there, so they stop and say, hey, can you shove your backpack under a little bit more? So you adjust it. And then the pilot comes on and gives you your information about what to expect on this flight. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Is the pilot a male or a female in your scenario that you are considering right now? And then I want you to ask yourself, why? Okay, as we're doing this visualization. Now I want you to think about you are going out to dinner with your best friend. You are eating at one of these fantastic new restaurants and you're so excited because the food's going to be amazing. You haven't caught up with your best friend in a while. The waitress comes over, pours water. Yep, everything's getting ready. You're starting with a couple of drinks. She waves and you look over and you see this unbelievably cute couple next to you. I want you to think about this. Is it two men? Is it two women? Is it a man and a woman? Now ask yourself why. And when we start to think about this from these lenses, this is how we start to showcase that we do have some unconscious bias. A lot of times we are going to think of a pilot as a male. We might think of when I look over and see a happy couple, we think it's one man and one woman, but really they can be whatever. And so when we think about how we approach things from our own lens and our own life experiences, this is where we start to understand why bias does exist. And I see we've been very conditioned this way, absolutely, which is why the awareness part behind bias is so important. And I love Valerie Alexander's illustration of this because there is a lot of our own perceptions. It is a lot of our own experiences that we bring to the table. And this is why it's important to understand this is the way that you are approaching the situation. Somebody else might not be approaching that situation. And I see that some people have said, well, I've only had male pilots. I haven't. I've had female pilots. So I would like to offer an alternative perspective that women are just as capable and out there now as men to be pilots. And so it's something to be important. I actually was flying through Houston recently and I saw a poster of all females and it said, hey, pilots, you belong here. And it was women. And I was like, I love that. This is where we're trying to get the narrative change and a perspective shift. And so, again, if you are looking at how you are trying to bring inclusivity in the workplace, This is a really great place for you guys to think about how your biases are in play with your own childhood experiences, what you've been conditioned to understand, and then how do we think about offering ourselves an alternative perspective around this? So things to think about. Some of you ever had a moment where you caught yourself being biased? Some of you might have just recognized that through our visualization exercise. So this is kind of where we think about, all right, how do we think about this from the lens of the people in which we're working with? Right. So if we all have this that comes together, this is where, again, I don't believe that people have the innate or intent behind this, but it's just something that we want to be aware of, that the lens that we approach things from is going to look differently based upon our own life experiences, even from the geographic locations that we've grown up. Things are handled very different. So this is where we want to just kind of learn to cultivate the awareness and the experience that comes from that. So let's talk about applying this positivity, the positive psychology in the workplace. And again, I've got all these smiley faces and kiss emojis, but we know that that's not entirely true because it isn't just flapping a smile across your face, but it's actually an innate rewiring of how we approach situations, understanding the behavior of people and how we play that into our mindset and what we're doing. So when we start to look at the principles that exist within the workplace, this is where we want to showcase that gratitude. When people do something great or they help you out or they participate in something, saying thank you and offering gratitude, very specific gratitude for what they have done to help either further the mission, what they've done, a project, any type of work. Offering that gratitude and giving people the credit where credit is due helps people feel valued and respected. And most of the time, people want to be seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued in the workplace. We need that. If you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're trying to climb up that needs analysis, really looking at that self-actualization where dignity and respect are really important. A lot of this we get from work. So being able to showcase that and focus on that element can be really important as a driving factor of success and job satisfaction, as well as employee engagement. It gives people meaning and purpose within their positions, and offering gratitude in that process can be absolutely the snowball effect of helping people feel valued along their position. Then we look at empathy, right? Empathy is one that is like a muscle. You can go to the gym and work out your muscles and get stronger. Empathy is something that is similar like that. This is where we start to foster understanding and inclusivity, encouraging people to consider these diverse perspectives. Okay. So is it possible that a woman can be a pilot? Absolutely it is. Okay. But if that's something that you've never seen before, and I think about this as a professor, I have a lot of students that haven't seen women work, which is also a different, but it's a different perspective. It doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different. And again, if we start to focus on these things for people's perceptions and whatnot, everyone's got their own life story. So how do we offer alternative perspectives to boost this inclusivity and offering these like, hey, what do you think on that? Not everyone with a diverse perspective is going to want to speak up either. So you've got to figure out what framework works best within your team dynamics to want to boost this. Like, can you offer me an alternative perspective? I'll give you guys a very personal example that happened to me yesterday. So I was covering business casual versus biz, business casual versus business formal in the workplace because a lot of our students don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And so we wanted to talk about like how you should show up to an interview. How do you dress for the workplace? How do you dress if you're in a remote environment? What does this mean? And one of the perspectives that I hadn't thought of is that we polarize so heavily gender specific. Well, what happens if you don't identify by a gender specific group? How do you approach that? And so this is a lens that I hadn't thought of, but I was offered this by a couple of students. So like, can we offer an alternative perspective to this? I'm like, please do, and help me find a solution. If you're going to offer an alternative perspective, what is the solution that you propose to it? Like we can talk about things, but also bringing people problems or things like that without a solution isn't necessarily helpful. So like, help me understand what could I do to make this more inclusive and how do I handle this dynamic moving forward? Also, there is still there's a lot that goes into that just from that specific example, but that's one from yesterday that I can give you where I was like, okay, I probably could do this better. Somebody help me understand what other lens should I be considering in presenting information like this. It's something to think about. Then as we look at resilience, this is where we are building support and well-being. All right. During challenging times, if we know somebody needs to take a walk, are you encouraging of this? If somebody has a comment that is made during a meeting, it might make somebody feel upset or unhappy, do we offer a moment to just let them physiologically reset themselves? Do we handle it? Just things that we've got to think about, or what is in our scope of control to help kind of cultivate this world of an experience that we really want our workplace to have, up to the cadence and the respect and the inclusion that we all want to feel within our workplace, because nobody wants to feel like they just walked into the middle school cafeteria where they don't belong. And then looking at this last principle of strengths-based leadership, we want not only for ourselves, we also want our other leaders to help leverage other people's strengths, showcasing them, giving positive reinforcement, because not everyone's aware of their strengths. If we think about it, a lot of times if I asked you to list off all your strengths right now, people might have a different perception of what your strengths are than what you would write down for yourself. But this can also help us create a more positive and productive work environment when we're focusing on the things people can do well versus trying to get them to do some of their weaknesses at a higher caliber. So there are ways to take these practical application of positive psychology. I am someone who likes to start off all of my meetings and even my classrooms with tell me three good things since the last time we saw each other. One of the reasons I like this is it's going to shift the mindset into a positive one. People are going to start thinking of, okay, what is going well in my world? And it's also a time where people, when you have a more positive mindset, people are more susceptible to take in information and learn. So if you're starting your meetings this way, you can't control what else has been going on in the outside world, but for the tone of your meeting and the work environment that you set, this is like the framework where we're going to start every meeting with tell me three good things since the last time we saw each other. All right. Tell me three good things that are going on in your day. You can even make it very team approach. Tell me three good things that have happened within the team. And we start to look at things in this landscape of I can't control that, but I control how we're going to talk to each other and how we're going to frame this meeting time or our time together. When we look at encouraging empathy and listening, okay, where's your phones right now? Think about this. Where are your phones? Like, I don't have mine out, but put your phone away. Make sure it's out of sight when you are communicating with another person, especially face to face. Because even if somebody sees your phone, flipping it over does not count. People are distracted when they see somebody's phone out, and they only retain about 24% of what you're saying. 76% gets lost if your phone is out. I want you to try this the next time you go have coffee or you go to dinner with someone or lunch or whatever, a meal of food where you're exchanging time with another person. Keep your phone out of sight, out of mind. Same thing when you've got people that are coming into your office to come talk to you. I want you to think about it from that standpoint. Put your phone in a drawer, move it away. It is a sign of respect. And if you do these things, small things done over time will help build a more inclusive environment where people actually think that you are listening to them. And it's more of like that undivided attention. And people don't think about this in this capacity where I really wish we would. There are studies being done on this right now. Simon Sinek talks about this quite a bit, but paying attention, like the phone is a big deal. And when we're trying to get people to make us feel seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued, and doing that for other people, the location of that phone can be huge. Also, pay attention to your body language. Are your shoulders turned towards that person that you are speaking to? Oh, oops, my bad. Are your shoulders turned towards that person that you are speaking to so that your energy is being faced squarely with that person? Those are things that you want to consider because that is how someone perceives if you are actively listening to them. Then also we want to echo back about 3 to 5 words with the language that they have chosen to use so that they understand that we are understanding the definitions or the roles that they are speaking of or the lens of perception that they're bringing to the table. This helps people feel validated. And there's small, tiny little things, but done well over time can absolutely add value to the relationships among the team. So what do you guys think? What else can you do from a practical application standpoint of applying some of these principles to your work environment? Give anything, add anything to our chat? Use feel, felt, found method. I don't know much about that. Would you mind taking yourself off of mute and explaining this? Trying to keep names off in case you do not want your name used today.
Great day, everyone. So for me, Claire, I
Yeah.
when I have been met with a challenge, so it was definitely something where there was a challenge and someone, um, told me how they were having this challenge. And I usually say, you know what, I feel the same way. I felt that when X, Y, and Z happened, that I found myself in the same position. However, what I found was if I were to do X, Y, and Z, I would not be feeling that way or I would not have taken it that way. So I call it the feel, felt, found method so that you're identifying with that person, you're aligning yourself with their thoughts and their feelings, and you're acknowledging their feelings, and you're letting them know how to resolve whatever the challenge is. Because you know what? I found if I listened more intently, I'd understand where the person is coming from. So that's my approach, and that has been quite effective for me.
I love that. That is such a great example. Thank you so much. Yeah, and then we have another participant. This is what helps people from being on the defensive. Absolutely. This is where emotions can run high. And while we're trying to stick to a specific issue and not attack a person when it comes to things, especially when we're like looking at feedback, for example, we want to stick to the issue. The thing is, if you're invested in what you do, or you love your job, or you put a lot of energy towards something, those issues can feel personal because of the amount of value we've placed on them. And so I love the feel, felt, found method because it offers such a great way to align yourself from this approach. And then what are you going to do with it? Oh, that was awesome. Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to ask the rest of you, what's one positive psychology practice you could implement within your team? I can tell you, I'm going to start doing this feel, felt, found method. That was amazing. I love that. What else do you guys have? Allow everyone to come to the table as their authentic selves. If you don't mind coming off mute, what does that look like? How do I know that I'm able to bring my authentic self? What does that feel like within your group?
Knowing that you can have a conversation with your team members and not feel judged or belittled, and you feel safe. You're able to be vulnerable, and you know that conversation is trusted.
Love that. I think that's important. Not judged, not belittled. I think something else when we talk about safety is that there's not a fear of retribution, and that if I share something, it's not going to be used against me. I think there are certain times where we want leaders to be vulnerable. We want our team members to be vulnerable, and then it gets used against them at a later date, and that can just erode so much of what we're trying to do here from an inclusive standpoint. So having that psychological safety of bringing your authentic self, where you're not going to be judged. If you offer a position or you offer an idea where that's not going to be used against you at a later time, things to think about. Other things that we have in here, when you bring a challenge, what are your thoughts and ideas about solutions? Absolutely. If you're going to bring me a problem, I would like you to have an idea of how you would like to handle it. Otherwise, we end up feeding this dreaded drama triangle, which we just don't have time for. We've got just enough energy, got a specific amount of energy every day. Where are you going to spend it? I would rather spend it on solutions rather than in like this dreaded drama circle that can exist. Start each meeting with each person providing a positive thought or experience for the day. Love that. Thank you. Okay, so now let's talk about setting and communicating boundaries because this is one that gets a little dicey sometimes, especially when we're talking about biases in the workplace and positive psychology. So here's something. I want to offer you guys this beautiful gift of taking like the first 2 hours of your Monday and the last 2 hours of your Friday and blocking that off for you to just have time to get your own stuff done. When we start to look at boundaries, boundaries help prevent burnout. I know some people do no meeting Friday. Okay, we all know that that's not necessarily realistic, but what about just half hour at the beginning of your day or a half hour at the end of your day? Where can you start to put some boundary time for yourself? Because I'm a big believer. I want intentional time. Like if you want to set time with me, you want to set a meeting, you want to spend time together. I want to know what you want. What do you want to get out of this experience together? What do you want from me to add value? And what do you want to bring to the table? And I think about this from meetings. We get invited to so many meetings. If there is no agenda and I don't know why I'm coming to add value to it, I'm not coming. Unless you are doing, if you're the one that is setting it, I need to have clear expectations. That is a boundary that I started to allow myself last year, and I love it. The one that I've added in recently was the 2 hours on Monday and 2 hours on Friday, just so that I get time so that I feel as good as I possibly can about knowing what's coming for the week. And I can be as educated as possible in anything that's going to get thrown at me. And then also trying to tie up all loose ends that I can on a Friday. Now, I understand that that might not work for everyone, but what boundaries can be good for you? And again, when we start to look at this, burnout is running higher than ever. We also want to have respect. And so when I look at the, hey, I want time from you, I look at it as a mutual respect. I want you clear and what you want to get out of our time together. If we look again at our energy bank, we only have so much time. We only have so much energy. We only have so many resources. How do we maximize this for you to be clear on what you need and for me to be clear on what I can do to help with the process? And this is where we start to look at, all right, how do we balance our own work life and what is going to make you feel good for you? I know Sam's on, and I know her group uses like a time block method for emails, which is also phenomenal. Where it's like, okay, I'm going to spend this chunk of time responding to emails, and then I'll spend another chunk of time later doing that instead of constantly trying to rapid fire answer people's emails on a regular basis. Awesome. So, what can you do for you to kind of put some boundaries in place to feel good about things? When we look at strategies for setting boundaries, this is like very important that you hold yourself accountable. So I am terrible at this where I will respond to emails pretty much at any point and any time. I need to get better at this one where I'm not responding after 6 p.m. I would really like to get to the point where I don't look at my emails after a certain time, but we're doing baby steps right now. And we're always a work in progress. We also want to use I statements in communicating our needs. So if I go back to that meeting, if you want time with me, I need to be very clear on what you want from me, because if I need to provide you with resources, I'd like to have those on the front end so that we can maximize our time together instead of me having to do 15 follow-ups, because I won't have that time later or I might forget. So I need to finish this before taking on more. Another great resource was we were talking about this. If your boss ever comes to you and says, hey, can you handle this? Remind them that I have this, and this off on my plate right now. If you want me to take this on, what can you either move to someone else? What can be delayed to a later time? Really showcasing that you are very cognizant of where you're spending your time, your talent, and your resources. And this is also, we want to be very respectful of other people so that they can do the same thing too. And if you're leading by example and showing people, this is how I've set boundaries for myself, this is how we teach other people to do the same for themselves. So what's the boundary that you've set that's helped you maintain a balance in work? Anybody have anything else? I'm a big fan of the no agenda, no attenda. You don't get to throw a 2 hour meeting on my calendar and expect me to show up with, I have no idea what the meeting is even for or whatnot. Yes, we are all works in progress. This is where awareness is step one, but it is helpful to hear like what other people are doing. I'm stealing the 2 hours on a Monday and 2 hours on a Friday from another friend who started to do that because she felt a lot better of just having the time to set forth that, okay, this is how I'm going to prep my week. I don't want to use my Sunday for it. I'm going to use my first 2 hours of my Monday morning to do it. And I'm going to stop Friday at like 2, and I'm going to spend the rest of that time tying up my loose ends so I feel clear for the weekends. Things to think about. Oh, there's no complaining. We challenge along with solution ideas. That is beautiful. I love that one too. So what happens when we're leading a team and we notice that certain team members aren't speaking up? What could you do to encourage inclusive participation? Give you guys an example from my own stance. I've left the room. I think there are certain times where when leadership is present, there is a power perception that exists. And sometimes people will not give honest answers if there's leadership in the room. So I have asked leaders that worked for me and myself, we have gotten up and left the room, and we would give a speaking, or we would have one of our employees be the spokesperson for the group, and they would operate with like an open forum to get idea sharing and whatnot. So it was people sharing like ideas in a safer space where they didn't feel fear of retribution. I think one of the other things is that if you know someone is being quiet in a meeting, see them if there's an alternate perspective, or if they aren't comfortable sharing that in a group, can you circle back afterwards or send an email that was like, hey, I noticed that you were quiet in that meeting. Do you have anything that you want me to think about? Is there anything that you want to add to this? because not everyone is going to be that extroverted, hey, yeah, I got an idea. And we understand that, but we want to make sure that we are doing what we can to try and right size this. And this is an area of opportunity, I think, for a lot of people. All right, let's figure this out. We're going to wrap this up now. So how would you apply some positive psychology principles to encourage more inclusive engagement? And I have one here. All right, meetings are mostly virtual. So we call on people individually, having a conversation, starting with how they are. And if there's anything that they want to say outside of the group, just in case they're uncomfortable. Love that. Set the tone and the framework up front. Very good. Okay, so let's make an action plan. So I think some of us got some awareness. Like I told you guys, I really need to start setting some boundaries for myself from a timeline standpoint. All right, so what are some biases or challenges that you need to work on? I think one of the ones that I have learned really heavily is that, and I just kind of laugh on this, but it's one of the reasons that I don't grade with seeing people's names. We do have a perception of people all the time. And so understanding that how people interact with you on a regular basis, how they show up, this is where we look at how we interact with people in a workplace. There's always information being exchanged, and it absolutely shapes the brand and the perception of that individual. Like if you see somebody that while you're in meetings is always on their computer, or to our friend that said that most of their meetings are virtual, and you can tell that they're not paying attention, it's absolutely building a framework in your mind. Now, we don't necessarily know what's going on, but there are things that we want to be cognizant and aware of so that we don't nelly or villainify or something like that with other people. But they're just things that we like to have awareness. And then have we set clear expectations? We have clear accountabilities and clear responsibilities along the way. So if you can think of something for you, I want you to reflect on that and give yourself 2 to 3 action item steps that you can do. And then set yourself a reminder. Technology can be your really big friend on this. And, awareness is the first step. One of the other things I like to tell people is during performance reviews, we've all got to keep that little folder that is, here's our attaboys, and maybe we keep them for our people. It's not good enough to just have the email folder. We need to have a little narrative that goes with each of the things. So if you can keep that too, so that you end up having a better snapshot for the year, this can help alleviate recency bias. It can help alleviate horns effect, and it can really help alleviate halo effect if you not only have the supportive documentation, but a couple little notes along that way. So as we get down to the last couple of slides here, what's one small change that you can commit to make your workplace more inclusive and positive? And as you reflect on that, I am going to say thank you for your time today.